Morning in Wexler, Kentucky, moved like an old song. The town square woke with a yawn, the courthouse clock tried twice before settling on 8, pigeons fanned and resettled on the bronze soldier, and someone's screen door complained down Maple Street. June's diner breathed out the day's first coffee the way a person exhales before saying something hard. Light slipped between awnings and landed in long rectangles on the brick. He came to the square at first light. The clown people had learned not to call a clown. White collar clean but softened by time, jacket the gray blue of a winter pond, face gentled by powder that made his eyes look farther away, like they were watching an ocean no one else could see. He carried a small red thread in his pocket that he sometimes tied around a child's wrist and sometimes around his own, as if to keep everyone from drifting off the edge of themselves. He didn't juggle, didn't smile for coins. He swept the steps with a straw broom someone left leaning against the statue. He helped a woman lift her bag of feed into a pickup and nodded when she said thank you. Mostly, he watched. It was how he stayed. At June's window booth, a boy colored in silence. Blue sky, yellow field, a small house drawn with a heavy hand until the pencil made an almost invisible tear in the paper. His name was Mason. He was 9 and he sat with his mother, Ruth, who worked here and had the careful cheer of someone who had learned what to do with worry. Fold it into napkins, tuck it into sugar caddies, rinse it from coffee cups with water so hot it made her fingers pink. She wore her hair in a knot that day, and the knot had loosened in a way that looked like apology. Ruth watched the street the way other people watch weather. It was small things. She checked the reflection in the chrome napkin holder when the bell over the door rang. She spun her wedding band by habit even when no one was near. And when the ice machine rattled, she flinched as if it were a voice calling her by a name she no longer answered to. June, who knew people by the weight of their footsteps, started a plate of pancakes without being asked and slid them toward Mason. Syrup warmed in a chipped pitcher. Across the square, the clown paused. He felt the shift the way a fishing line tightens without a visible hand. He set the broom down and looked at the diner window, not at anyone in particular, but through the glass in that still way of his, the way a pond looks back at the sky. A truck downshifted somewhere on the far road. The sound hung and then let go, like a door testing its hinge. On the bulletin board by the bus stop, someone had tacked a poster for the county fair with one bent staple. It lifted and pressed, as the morning breeze found its rhythm. The clown's gaze followed that small movement and then drifted lower, to Mason's picture, where the pencil had torn the field. He touched the red thread in his pocket. He waited. People say threats come with noise and brass, but in Wexler they arrived by omission. An extra chair not pulled up. A laugh clipped short. The way a man's shadow stopped at the threshold and measured the room before the man did. Ruth's shoulders found the smallest forward curl as if trying to be a harbor for her son. June refilled cups and kept a cloth in her hand, the cloth becoming a kind of prayer. The clown crossed the street without hurrying. He didn't press against the glass, didn't knock, didn't announce himself. He stood just beyond the diner door where the bell's tongue could see him and the people inside could pretend they didn't. He lifted a palm in greeting and lowered it again. His presence fit against the building like an extra beam. Inside, Mason stopped coloring. His hand shook once, the way a leaf trembles before settling, and then he slid from the booth. He crossed the tile and pushed through the door as if air had become thick. He found the clown's coat and leaned against it, cheek to fabric, his breath hot and fast through his nose. He didn't look up when he spoke. "He's coming," the boy whispered, but the words were smaller than the tremble that carried them. The clown did not ask who. He placed his open hand near the boy's back without touching, a private shelter. Across the square, the courthouse clock tried to find 9 and missed. A far-off dog barked once and decided against it. Ruth reached the doorway and stopped, eyes on the street beyond the clown's shoulder, on a distance that seemed to be moving closer. She didn't say anything. Her silence pulled the room into itself. He nodded, the smallest motion, as if a decision had been waiting for this exact breath. He turned his face toward the empty road, his posture becoming a line laid gently across a threshold. He was there. He would remain. The square took note in its quiet ways. The pigeons lifted as one and settled again. The bent staple held. The syrup pitcher caught a slant of light that made it look like amber holding a small, useful sun. But no one in that town could imagine what would come next. The road from the diner curved past the water tower and vanished behind the grain silos, a gray line swallowed by morning haze. The clown stood facing that direction, his figure still as a gate left open on purpose. Mason clung to the edge of his coat, his small hand hidden in the folds. Ruth stood a few steps behind them, one arm wrapped around her stomach as if to keep herself from spilling. Nothing moved for a long time. Only the sound of the wind pushing the flags above the courthouse. An uneven, hollow sound that carried the weight of something expected. When it came, it wasn't a roar or a siren, just the slow groan of tires finding gravel. A distant hum. Then silence again, thick enough to taste. The truck, maybe. Or something else that sounded like one. Ruth closed her eyes once, just enough to lose focus, then opened them and stared at the clown's back. He didn't turn. Inside the diner, June stood behind the counter holding a pot of coffee that had gone cold. She looked at the three of them through the glass, the clown, the boy, the woman, and didn't move. She understood that some moments were built for witnesses, not participants. The old radio whispered an old song, and its static seemed to breathe with them. The clown lifted one hand and traced a small arc in the air, like someone blessing the invisible. Mason followed the motion with his eyes. He didn't ask what it meant. A crow landed on the top of the stop sign, black against the wide light. It turned its head sharply, as if listening. In the hush that followed, Ruth spoke without volume, her lips shaping words that barely left her mouth. "He found us." The clown lowered his hand. His face didn't change, but his eyes seemed to absorb the street, the old post office, the boarded barbershop, the faint reflection of a truck door in a diner window. He wasn't looking for a person. He was looking for a movement in the air, a displacement, something wrong in the stillness. Mason's fingers dug into the clown's sleeve. "Do we have to go?" The clown crouched to meet his height. The white paint on his cheek cracked slightly with a bend. He didn't answer with words. He simply held out his hand, palm up. The boy placed his small sketchbook there, the one with the torn paper. The clown turned the page, found the drawing of the house, and with the same gentleness used to tie a red thread, he pressed his thumb over the tear until the fibers met again. A truck appeared at the far edge of the square, sunlight bouncing off its windshield. Ruth's breath caught. The vehicle slowed but didn't stop. It rolled past, engine low, the driver hidden by glare. Still, Ruth's shoulders tensed until the last echo of tires on pavement was gone. The clown looked at her, not questioning, not probing, just meeting her gaze long enough for her to understand she wasn't alone in this waiting. She tried to smile, but her face broke instead. "He doesn't like when we stay somewhere too long," she said, as if confessing to the air. The clown rose, his coat brushing Mason's shoulder. From his pocket, he pulled the red thread and held it toward the boy. Mason's eyes followed the movement, wide and uncertain. The clown tied the thread around his wrist with slow precision, a tiny knot that caught the morning light. Ruth watched. "What does it mean?" He looked at her, and though he didn't speak, the silence around him felt like an answer. Something about staying, about being seen, about holding even when things shake. Mason held up his wrist, inspecting the red mark, the color of something alive. "Will he find us here?" The clown looked toward the road again. The crow lifted from the signpost, flying low across the street toward the water tower. A cloud passed over the sun, cooling the square. He didn't answer. Ruth took a half step forward, stopping beside him. The smell of old paint, faint grease, and dust filled the air between them. "We can't keep running," she whispered. The clown turned slightly, enough to see her reflection in the diner window behind them. The woman, the child, and his own outline beside theirs. A small family caught between staying and fleeing. From somewhere behind the silos, thunder rolled, soft, uncertain, as if the weather itself hadn't made up its mind. June opened the diner door and called softly, "You three should come inside." Her voice trembled at the edge of its calm. The clown looked at Ruth and Mason. Then, without speaking, he led them back toward the door. His steps made no sound on the cracked pavement. The moment they crossed the threshold, the air changed. Behind them, the square looked the same. But something had shifted. The crow was gone. The truck had left a single tire mark on the road. And on the diner counter, the coffee pot began to steam again, though no one had turned the burner back on. The town held its breath, waiting for something it could not yet name. June set 3 cups on the counter, though only 2 would be used. The steam curled up like handwriting no one could read. The clown stood just inside the doorway, one palm near the bell without touching it, as if sound could be kept from happening by sheer patience. Mason slid into the corner booth again, the red thread bright against his wrist. Ruth stood instead, hands flat on the formica as if steadying a table that didn't truly wobble. Outside, the square arranged its quiet. The courthouse clock searched for the hour and declined to name it. Wind pressed the fair poster and let it go. Somewhere, a screen door closed with a gentleness that felt practiced. June poured coffee, stopped before the cups reached full. "Sugar?" she asked no one. Her voice sounded like a porch light left on during daylight, unnecessary and kind. The clown's gaze moved along the windows, counting reflections, measuring angles. He took a napkin from the holder and folded it twice, neat as a pocket secret. Then he walked to the far end of the room and laid that small square on the threshold of the back door where the kitchen met the alley. It was nothing to look at. It was everything to step over. Ruth watched him and understood that a line had been drawn without chalk or words. She breathed deeper, as if her lungs remembered their size. Mason lifted his sketchbook again and turned to a fresh page. He drew a circle, then another inside it, then a small square, a window maybe, and pressed too hard until the pencil squeaked. A pickup rolled slowly past, radio bass a faint thump, then faded. The bell didn't ring. The clown had moved an inch closer to it without appearing to move at all. His coat, still and heavy, brushed the glass. "Storm," June said to the room, glancing at the light that had gone the color of old pears. "Or something like it." She set a plate of toast near Mason's elbow. He didn't eat. He erased the inner circle and left a soft gray halo. Ruth's phone, face down on the counter, blinked once. She didn't turn it over. The clown's eyes noted the small pulse and then went back to the street. He lifted his hand slightly, permission to leave the phone as it was. Ruth nodded, grateful for a rule she didn't have to make. From the kitchen, the walk-in cooler hummed, then shuddered quiet, then began again with a steadier tone. June exhaled, as if the machine's rhythm had been her own. She wiped a clean counter out of habit. Mason slid out of the booth and stood beside the clown. He held up the sketchbook so the man could see the circle. "Is this strong?" The words barely left him. The clown looked and then, with a fingertip, pressed a dot in the exact center of the circle, a mark so small it might have been an accident. Mason nodded as if instructed. He drew a line from the dot to the square he'd made like a window. He smiled without showing teeth. Outside, the crow returned, stepping on the diner's curb sign with a measured patience. It tilted its head, eye like a dropped bead. The clown watched it and listened to what its presence did to the air. Ruth's phone blinked again and then began to vibrate, a small sound that made the cups on their saucers tick. She turned it over. No name, just a number that felt like a road you shouldn't take at night. Her finger hovered. Then she placed the phone on the napkin by the back door, the one the clown had laid down, as if leaving it there might cool it. The bell over the door lifted a fraction, metal mouth opening, and settled. No one had pushed it. The clown placed his palm gently against the wood. He didn't lean. He didn't brace. He simply let the door know it was not alone. Mason whispered, "What if he is already here?" The clown looked at the boy and then at the room's corners, and it was clear he knew the difference between someone being near and someone being allowed near. He stepped to the window and, with 2 fingers, adjusted the blind so a slat of light cut across the floor and stopped at the toe of Ruth's shoe. She stood within it, then back out, then in again like testing water. June removed the closed sign from beneath the counter and turned it over in her hands without hanging it. "We don't have to make a scene," she said, more to the walls than to people. The clown took the sign and set it quietly in the window, not as refusal but as rest. A shape paused across the street, just a figure at the edge of the courthouse steps, unreadable at that distance. The square felt it the way a dog feels a storm an hour early. Ruth's shoulders rose and then didn't fall. Mason took the clown's sleeve between two fingers, not clutching now, just locating himself. The figure didn't move. A breeze tugged at the fare poster until the bent staple gave and the paper fluttered free, catching on a low shrub. The clown watched it travel, light as a choice. He stepped once to the side, placing himself between window and booth, a subtle rearrangement, as if furniture could learn a safer shape. The phone on the napkin went still. Then a single knock sounded from the alley door, soft, patient, practiced. June's hand tightened around her towel. Ruth closed her eyes. Mason held his breath. The clown didn't open the door. He turned the lock with a calm click and laid his palm flat against the wood the way you might greet a skittish horse. The knock did not repeat. Air moved along the floor and lifted the corner of the napkin. The coffee steamed in a long, unbroken thread. In that hush, the town leaned closer. The tower, the pigeons, the old bronze soldier, all listening to a choice being made without words. And though nothing seemed to happen, something had already begun to change. Rain arrived without ceremony. Not sudden, not loud, just a steady descent that made the square look half erased. The colors of Wexler folded into each other, brick into pavement, light into shadow, memory into air. Inside June's diner, the sound of it on the windows was like someone whispering a secret too many times to be believed. The clown stood near the door, unmoving. His reflection hovered faintly on the glass beside Mason's. The boy was quiet, chin on the tabletop, eyes tracing the rain's vertical threads as though each drop might carry an answer if he looked long enough. Ruth had taken a seat finally. She wasn't drinking the coffee June poured for her. The cup sat cooling in her hands. When she spoke, her voice carried the texture of exhaustion, like paper softened by water. "He doesn't know how to stop," she said. "He never learned." No one replied. The rain did the talking, soft percussion against the world's tired skin. The clown turned his head slightly, enough to see her but not enough to intrude. His gaze felt like an open door with no words behind it. Ruth breathed in, as if that silence had given her permission to exist. From outside, thunder grumbled somewhere over the hills. The figure that had stood near the courthouse was gone now, or perhaps just melted into the gray. But its absence didn't bring peace. It brought waiting. June moved through the diner in slow circles, drying plates that were already dry, straightening menus that were already straight. The clock above the counter ticked once every few seconds, each click like a heartbeat checking in. When the power flickered, no one startled. The light dimmed and swelled again, the way courage sometimes does. The clown stepped closer to the table where Ruth and Mason sat. He reached for the napkin dispenser and slid one sheet free. On it, with a fingertip still faintly dusted in white paint, he drew a small mark, a line that curved upward and then broke before it could finish. Not a smile. Not a frown. Something in between. Mason watched. "Is that us?" he asked. The clown's eyes moved from the boy to Ruth, and then to the door, where the sound of rain thickened. He placed the napkin face down and pressed it to the table with his palm. Mason understood somehow that it wasn't to be looked at yet. The bell over the door quivered again. No one had touched it. Wind moved beneath the sill, cold and searching. Ruth's eyes flicked to the lock, to the puddle gathering outside. For a moment, her breath caught on the shape of something beyond the window. Maybe a shadow, maybe a memory. Then, through the murky pane, headlights flared. A car, idling near the edge of the square. The beams crawled across the diner's ceiling, two pale animals pacing the room. June's hand froze mid-wipe. Ruth whispered, "He doesn't knock twice." The clown turned toward the window but didn't approach it. He simply shifted his posture, weight balanced, as though measuring the distance between heartbeat and consequence. The red thread around Mason's wrist trembled with his pulse. The car engine stopped. Silence settled again, layered over the rain's rhythm. Then came the creak of a door opening. Slow, reluctant. Ruth's hands tightened on the coffee cup until it trembled against the saucer. The clown reached into his coat pocket. He drew out nothing visible, only closed his fist, as if holding something made of air. He kneeled beside Mason and opened that fist. The boy looked down, and though nothing could be seen, he smiled faintly, trusting whatever invisible thing had been offered. Outside, the headlights dimmed. A figure, little more than a shadow in the mist, stood by the curb. The clown didn't move. He simply lifted his head, eyes steady, and the rain seemed to ease, each drop slower, more deliberate. Ruth rose. June started to speak, but stopped. The woman walked to the window, close enough for her breath to fog the glass. The shadow beyond the street didn't move closer, but its presence pressed like weight on her chest. The clown took one step forward and placed his hand, pale, painted, patient, against the glass beside her face. The reflection merged them briefly. The clown, the woman, and the rain making them one blurred outline. The headlights flickered once, then vanished. The sound of the car door closing came late, soft, almost apologetic. Then the engine turned over and retreated down the road, swallowed by distance. Ruth's knees gave a little. The clown's hand stayed on the window, steady as breath. Mason, from the booth, exhaled a sound that could have been relief or disbelief. June set the towel down and looked at the ceiling as if thanking something unnamed. Ruth turned to the clown, tears standing but unshed. "You didn't even move," she said, voice breaking on the edge of awe. He looked at her for a long moment, then at Mason, then at the empty street where only rain remained. He didn't need to answer. The stillness had done it for him. Ruth sat again, the cup finally reaching her lips. Mason leaned against her arm, small, safe, trembling. The rain lightened, leaving behind that hollow quiet that comes after something has decided not to happen. The clown walked to the door and opened it an inch. Fresh air drifted in, clean, wet, almost kind. He looked out, not to make sure it was over, but to remember it had passed. Behind him, June whispered, "Maybe it's done now." He didn't nod. He simply closed the door gently, the bell giving one soft note, almost a sigh. But the storm had only changed its shape. Evening didn't arrive so much as settle, a slow lowering of the sky until Wexler wore the color of a bruise. The rain thinned to a mist that made the square look like it was thinking. Lights came on in the courthouse like eyes deciding to stay open. June turned the diner sign to closed without flipping the deadbolt. It felt important to leave one thing undone. The clown stood with his hand on the door, feeling the temperature of the air the way a mechanic listens to an engine. Ruth sat with Mason tucked into her side, his cheek against her sweater. The red thread shone a dull ember at his wrist. The phone on the napkin remained dark, as if ashamed of the noise it could make. A train horn drifted in from the river bend, long and low, then far again. The sound loosened something in Ruth's shoulders. The clown watched the windows take their own reflections and give them back, watched the town gather itself like an animal curling in hay. "We shouldn't walk home," June said, almost to herself. "But you can't sleep here, either." The clown lifted his gaze to the ceiling and then to the back hallway. He tapped the counter once with two knuckles, not a signal so much as a direction that could be refused. Ruth nodded. The boy looked up at his mother for permission that had already been given. They left through the kitchen, past the cooler's patient hum and the shelf of pickles, past the back door the clown had locked. He unlocked it now and opened it a hand's width, letting the alley's damp come in. He stepped out first. The mist touched the white paint at his cheek and left tiny beads like second thoughts. The alley ran toward the grain silos and the open field beyond, where grass held rain like a low-lit sea. They walked in a single file. The clown, then Mason with his fingers hooked in the hem of the coat, then Ruth, then June for a few yards before she stopped and watched them go. The town watched too. Curtains stirred, the the water tower hummed quietly, a dog lifted its head and decided this wasn't the moment to announce anything. At the field's edge, the clown stopped. The earth smelled clean and metallic. Fireflies stuttered, late survivors of the season, writing and erasing their soft code. He reached into his pocket and brought out the last of the red thread. He didn't string it as a fence. He tied one end to Mason's wrist beside the first knot. The other end he looped around a stalk of Johnson grass sturdy enough to hold a promise. Ruth stood beside them, her breath making small clouds that dissolved before they were noticed. "I used to come here," she said, voice thinned by memory. "Before." The clown faced the road that skirted the field. From behind the silos, an engine idled, never choosing to appear. A man's voice came at a distance. Only a cadence, not words, the shape of claim without the claim. The clown did not move toward it. He didn't retreat. He lowered his chin, a quiet lowering like a gate settling into its groove, and put his body in the straight line between that sound and the two people who mattered. Mason shifted, then stilled. He let go of the coat and bent to draw with his finger in the mud. The circle again, the dot again, then a short line outward like a lighthouse beam. Ruth watched him, a hand hovering above his head but not resting there yet. The voice called once more, nearer, and a door shut somewhere. Solid, final. The engine cut. Silence poured into the field like milk. It thickened the air. Ruth took a step back without meaning to. The clown didn't. He lifted his hand, palm outward, not accusing, not warding, just present, the way a tree is present on a hill. Wind came over the grass and parted at his shoulder. The fireflies blinked in a new pattern, as if learning a different night. A figure stood at the far fence line, barely more than a darker piece of dark. It didn't cross. It didn't speak. The field itself seemed to keep it where it was, a geography of refusal no law could write. The clown's hand remained raised until the figure's weight shifted backward, until the dark lost the part of itself that had been leaning. Ruth exhaled so slowly it wasn't clear when she started. She put her palm on Mason's hair, finally, and the boy's drawing smudged under a drop of mist. The circle held anyway. From town, the whistle of the train returned. One note, then silence, as if approving the distance newly drawn. June's diner sign glowed from 2 streets away like a small hearth someone had left for them. The courthouse clock found a number and kept it. They stood until standing felt like a kind of sleep. The clown lowered his hand and untied the thread from the grass. He didn't pocket it. He pressed the loose end into Ruth's palm. She closed her fingers as if it had heat. They walked back along the alley, not quickly, turning corners the town had memorized for them. In the square, the bronze soldier seemed to face a different direction. The crow had taken the fair poster into its nest, maybe. The shrub was empty. At the diner door, June waited with a towel folded like a flag. She looked at their faces and didn't ask. The clown touched the bell gently. It made the smallest sound and then rested. Ruth placed the thread on the counter. "I think we can go home," she said, testing the word home against her mouth like a new kind of quiet. Mason lifted his wrist and watched the knot gleam. The clown nodded once, not granting permission, joining it. He would walk them, and then he would stand until the night was done. But as they stepped into the street, the town felt another door closing somewhere, softly changing the path of what would follow. They walked with the kind of care people use when the dark has learned their names. The square fell behind them, its windows keeping watch. Maple Street opened like a long-held breath. Porch bulbs woke one by one, small moons deciding to help. The clown led, not by pulling but by being first to meet whatever the street remembered. Mason counted cracks in the sidewalk until the numbers calmed him. The red thread brushed his pulse. Ruth kept a hand at the boy's shoulder and another at her own elbow, as if she could hold both of them at once. The air smelled like rain that had not finished telling its story. They passed the laundromat with its ghost-white machines, the barbershop with a striped pole that spun only in the mind. At the corner, Mr. Harlan's dog lifted its head from the porch and watched without sound. Curtains changed shape and then returned, the town pretending not to look. Their house waited, one story, paint the color of oatmeal, a porch swing that sighed when wind remembered it. The yard made a soft complaint underfoot. Ruth touched the gate and paused. She looked down the road as though an answer might be coming from there. It didn't. The clown stepped onto the porch and stood beside the door, his presence making the wood feel honest. The key found the lock without trouble. Inside, the living room wore its quiet like a blanket. 2 chairs, a lamp with a crooked shade, a pile of library books on the floor where Mason had left them weeks ago. The air had the faint smell of soap and old coffee. Ruth set her bag down slowly, like placing a glass on a shelf in a house that wasn't sure of its shelves. Mason walked to the window and pulled the curtain an inch. "Will he know this place?" he asked, voice no louder than the lamp's hum. The clown turned his head. He untied the loose end of red thread from Ruth's palm and knelt by the door. With a simple, careful motion, he tied the thread to the inside knob and then to the leg of the heavy hall table. Not a trap. Not a lock. A promise the house could read. Ruth watched his hands. Will that be enough? The question fell to the floor and waited there. He set his palm flat against the door, just above the knot, then left it there long enough for the wood to remember the shape of care. Only then did he rise. The back room carried the cold of rooms that try not to be needed. Mason took the blanket from the couch and wore it like a cape. He sat on the rug and opened his sketchbook. The circle appeared again, the dot. This time, the boy drew a line around the circle, not touching it, a soft guard that left gaps on purpose. He held it up. Ruth nodded, eyes wet and still. A car moved somewhere near, tires soft in wet gravel. It didn't slow. A door closed on a different street. Voices failed to become words. The refrigerator clicked and found its working tone. In the distance, the water tower sighed and the train kept its counsel. The clown stepped to the porch. He did not close the door behind him, only left it almost shut so the night could see he had taken the position it required of him. He stood beneath the porch light, which buzzed like something thinking. Moths wrote their brittle alphabets against the glass. His coat darkened at the shoulders where mist tried again. Across the road, a shape huddled beside the sycamore. Maybe a person, maybe a coil of shadow. The clown did not stare. He let his gaze sit on the street where a presence would have to walk if it meant to be more than rumor. His hands hung open, empty of theater, full of decision. Inside, Ruth folded a quilt at the foot of Mason's bed, then unfolded it and tucked it around him instead. She sat on the edge and listened to the quiet her body made when it wasn't bracing. A lamp in the hallway burned low. She looked toward the door where the red thread crossed and felt something inside her rotate a degree toward the idea of sleep. A small sound rose from the porch. Metal settling, the swing admitting a history. She stood and walked to the window. The clown was there, stillness given a name by lamplight. He lifted one hand, not waving, just letting her know that her seeing him and his seeing her had met in the air and agreed. Mason's breathing evened. He curled his fingers under his cheek, the thread marking a tiny comet across his wrist. Ruth pressed her palm against the cool glass. On the porch, the clown lowered his head as if listening to the boards remember other feet and decide against them. The figure at the sycamore slowly untangled into empty night. The street lamp blinked once and held. An owl turned the block into a question and then answered it with distance. The town, satisfied by some unspoken accounting, shifted its weight and settled deeper onto its foundations. Ruth stepped away from the window. She turned the hall lamp to the first click. The house changed color, softer at the edges. On the door, the red thread did not move. Outside, the clown remained, his posture a lit candle that did not drip. He would be there when the hour changed and when it changed again. But far beyond Maple Street, a voice left a message that would find them in the morning. Morning came sideways, hesitant and gray. The rain had stopped sometime before dawn, but its memory stayed on every surface. Porch rails, mailbox, the veins of leaves that still trembled from it. Wexler's streets looked washed clean, though everyone knew nothing ever really left this town. It just grew quieter. The clown hadn't moved from the porch. His coat hung heavy with dew, his makeup softened to pale suggestion. Birds began their uncertain chatter, as if rehearsing hope. When Ruth opened the door, light fell across his shoes, glinting faintly on the worn leather. "You didn't sleep," she said, not asking. He looked toward the horizon where the highway disappeared into morning fog, then back to her. The look said what words could never. He had stood because standing was part of the work. Inside, Mason was still curled beneath the quilt, face turned toward the window, his hand resting beside the red thread on his wrist. Ruth walked quietly, touched the blanket, then went to the kitchen. The smell of coffee rose slowly, the sound of its drip a kind of heartbeat the house could trust again. The clown stepped in only far enough for the door to close behind him. His boots left faint prints on the floorboards. Ruth handed him a mug, not sure if he would take it. He did, holding it with both hands, letting the heat find its way through the chill. She glanced at the phone on the counter. One missed call, no message. A new number. It sat there, a small object that had become a border between before and after. "I can't keep running," she said softly, more to herself than him. "But I don't know how to stay." The clown set the mug down. He reached for the napkin from his pocket, the one with the half-drawn curve, and placed it on the table. Then, with the slow precision of someone fixing a torn page, he finished the line, closing it into something whole. Ruth's eyes filled but didn't spill. What if he comes back? The clown looked toward the door. Outside, the light was bright enough now to reveal footprints in the soft mud leading away from the porch. Not his. Older. Fainter. The rain had blurred them at the edges, almost erased them, but not entirely. He stared at them as though remembering a map only he could read. He turned back to Ruth. She followed his gaze, and when she saw the prints, she didn't flinch. "Then I guess we'll know where he stood," she whispered. The clock above the sink began its slow ticking again, each second an ordinary mercy. Mason stirred in the other room, muttering the fragments of a dream. Ruth smiled through the ache of it. The clown listened, his expression unreadable but tender in its stillness. From outside came the sound of a mail truck, a door closing, the rustle of a letter dropped into the box. Ruth hesitated, then opened the door. The clown followed. The sky was clear now, pale blue stretched thin. She opened the mailbox and found a single envelope, no return address, her name written in a slanted hand she recognized too easily. She didn't open it. Her fingers pressed against the paper, feeling for the shape of what waited inside. The clown took one step closer. His shadow covered hers on the porch planks, and for a moment, that small overlap made her breathing steadier. Ruth set the letter down on the railing. "Maybe later," she said. He nodded once. The street was empty except for a woman walking her dog and a few leaves scraping along the curb. The town had gone back to pretending nothing unusual had happened. Even the air smelled domestic again. Soap, coffee, cut grass. Mason appeared in the doorway, blanket still over his shoulders. "It smells like the first day of school," he said sleepily. Ruth smiled at him, then turned toward the clown. He watched the boy as though memorizing something simple and irreplaceable. Mason walked to him and tugged lightly on his sleeve. "Are you going away now?" The clown crouched to meet his eyes. His painted mouth curved, not a smile, but the idea of one. He reached for Mason's wrist and checked the red thread. Still tied, still sure. Then he placed his palm gently over the knot. A quiet seal. The boy nodded, satisfied with whatever answer that gesture gave him. He turned and ran back inside. Ruth looked at the clown. "You saved us," she said. He didn't respond. His eyes drifted to the end of the street where fog still pooled between the trees, where roads disappeared and stories waited to begin again. He stepped down from the porch. The sound of his boots was soft but final. Ruth didn't try to stop him. She only watched, hand resting on the letter she still hadn't opened. He walked until the mist took him. The wind shifted, carrying the faintest trace of rain and something sweet, like cotton candy forgotten at a fair that never came to town. The door creaked behind her. Mason's voice called softly, "Mom." She turned, and for the first time in a long while, she smiled without apology. Outside, the last bead of water slid down the porch rail and fell, vanishing into the earth. But somewhere beyond Wexler, a child would whisper the same words again, and the clown would hear. The mist thinned until it became nothing more than a softness over the grass. Mason ate toast in small, neat bites, as if the act of eating could keep the morning from slipping. Ruth washed a cup that wasn't dirty, then set it upside down to dry. The letter waited on the porch rail, a quiet animal willing to be ignored as long as it could stay close. She put on her jacket. "Let's see June," she said, and Mason nodded like he was agreeing to a truce. They stepped onto Maple Street. The air had the shaken clean smell of a church on a weekday. Somewhere, a hammer tapped once and then thought better of it. They walked toward the square, shoes whispering on the damp. The town looked like a picture someone had left open on a table. Everything still, everything thinking. The water tower held a pale sky on its back. A school bus sighed 2 streets over, then moved on, relieved it didn't have to pass this way. June's diner glowed before they reached it. The closed sign was turned, but not convinced. June stood inside, counting bills, lips moving with the numbers. When she saw them, she didn't wave. She put the money away and opened the door. The bell made a small sound that felt like permission requesting permission. "You look different," she told Ruth, and then didn't explain the kindness in it. Mason found the corner booth and pressed his palm to the formica like checking a pulse. Ruth placed the envelope on the table between the salt and the sugar. She looked at it the way you look at a pond in winter, measuring how thick the ice might be. June poured coffee and moved the cup just an inch closer, not pushing, not retreating. "He's gone?" she asked, meaning the figure, meaning the night. Ruth's eyes flicked to the window, to the square where pigeons pecked at nothing. "He left," she said, and left the rest unsaid. The clown's straw broom leaned by the bronze soldier's base, handle beaded with old rain. No one had placed it there. No one had moved it since. Mason opened his sketchbook without sitting. He stood, face close to the paper, and drew the circle again, the dot again. This time he added another small circle beside it, almost touching, almost not. He slid into the booth, satisfied. Ruth touched the envelope. Her fingers found the edge. The paper gave like a breath. She paused. The room waited with her, the cooler, the radio, the clock that had started to keep steadier time. June folded a towel. Mason's leg bounced and then stilled. She tore the flap carefully, as if the tearing itself could be the harm. Inside, one sheet of paper. She unfolded it. 3 words in that slanted hand. "You will learn." The ink sat on the page like a bruise that had decided to stay. Ruth's face didn't change, but her hands went still. She placed the paper down next to Mason's drawing. The 2 circles regarded the 3 words. The 3 words regarded them back. June swore quietly into her towel and then apologized to the room. Ruth barely heard. The message was not a shout. It was a presence, a weight set on a table to see if the table would bow. The bell over the door lifted and returned. No one had entered. The clown wasn't there. But the space where he had stood yesterday felt filled by the after of him, the way a chair holds warmth a minute after someone rises. Mason reached for the page. "Learning is good," he said, as if proposing a new rule. Ruth smiled, the kind that feels like walking across a narrow board and finding your feet remember how. June took the letter, read it, and set it down with the edge aligned to the sugar. "We can show this to Hank at the station," she said. "Or we can not." Ruth looked past her to the broom by the statue. In the reflection of the window, the handle was a thin line dividing then from now. "Not yet," she said, and heard the steadiness in her own voice like a new sound. Outside, the courthouse clock sought a number and landed on it. A truck idled at the far curb and rolled on. The square rehearsed afternoon. Mason slid out of the booth and walked to the door, stopping short as if listening to something only he could hear. He turned and tugged Ruth's sleeve. "Look," he said. Across the street, on the bulletin board, the fair poster had been retacked with 2 staples, neat and firm. A small loop of red thread hung from one corner, caught and left there like a punctuation mark. Ruth took one step toward the glass. She didn't cry. She let the sight make space inside her instead. June followed their gaze, then nodded to no one. "He's around," she said, not meaning distance. Ruth folded the letter once, then again, smaller now, easier to put away. She didn't hide it. She slid it under the napkin with the half-finished curve and laid her palm over both. Mason lifted his wrist so the thread could see the light. The knot shone like a quiet star. The town took the moment into itself. The tower, the pigeons, the old soldier, the broom, the diner's soft hum, and set it somewhere safe. And even as noon came on, a shadow lengthened where there was no sun to cast it, asking something of them both that had not yet been named. Afternoon slid over Wexler like a hand smoothing a wrinkled shirt. The square brightened and then dulled again, a breathing thing. Ruth and Mason stepped out of June's with a letter folded small in Ruth's pocket, the bell's last note still wandering the air. The courthouse clock did its best with the hour and looked relieved to have chosen. They walked toward the library, where the bricks stayed cool and the windows kept dust like secrets. On the steps, a line of ants carried a crumb down into the crack between stones, purpose without ceremony. The clown stood in the shade beside the door, where a bulletin board offered lost cats and piano lessons. He wasn't looking at the flyers. He watched the reflection in the glass, the street behind them, the slow approach of nothing. Inside, the library smelled of old paper and lemon oil. Fans turned with the patience of barns. The librarian lifted her head and nodded as if acknowledging weather. Ruth took a table near the window. Mason sank to the carpet among picture books. The clown remained by the entrance, a quiet hinge that allowed coming and going to mean something. Mason chose a book with birds and sat cross-legged. He traced a sparrow's outline with his finger, then looked up and caught the clown's eye. Without speaking, the man lifted his hand and flattened his palm in the air. Listening. Mason listened. The building hummed, the pages whispered, a child coughed in the far aisle. Underneath, another sound, the faint rub of a shoe outside, stopping just short of the threshold and learning the shape of it. Ruth unfolded the letter, stared at the 3 words again, then folded it back until it was nothing but corners. She slid it under the cover of a book about Appalachia and placed her hand on top. Through the glass, a figure paused, a hat, a jacket, a way of standing that recognized ownership. He didn't enter. The doorknob thought about moving and didn't. The clown lifted 2 fingers and placed them lightly against the wood, as if reminding the door of its job. Sun crossed the floor and climbed the legs of tables. When Mason stood, the light lifted with him. He carried the bird book to Ruth and sat close enough that their shoulders learned each other again. The clown moved once, the smallest angle shift, opening a sight line to the back exit. Minutes arranged themselves and then let go. Someone dropped change at the front desk. Each coin sounded like a decision. The figure outside became absence, then rumor, then less. When they left, the town had softened to the hour that makes colors honest. The library's brick glowed like toast. On the bottom rail of the handrail, a smudge of white chalk, 3 short marks and a space where a 4th wanted to be. Ruth saw it, and her chest lifted and lowered slowly. The clown bent, thumbed the chalk into a pale cloud, and let it vanish. He wiped his finger on his coat without haste. They walked back by the water tower's shadow, which stretched as if remembering something taller. The clown moved slightly ahead, the way a lighthouse moves by simply staying where it has always been. Mason looked at his wrist and tugged the thread, testing its thought. "Can you teach me the listening?" he asked, almost embarrassed to want it. The clown stopped and crouched. He pressed his finger to the boy's wrist, just beside the pulse, then lifted the finger and placed it gently against the golden inside of Mason's elbow, then at the dip of his own throat, a map of quiet places. He shook his head a little, not no, but not yet. Mason nodded as if being given homework he could carry in his pocket. At home, the porch had warmed and then cooled again. A single moth rested on the glass. Ruth unlocked the door and stepped into the square of hallway light that always felt surprised to see them. The phone on the table blinked once, as if remembering a message. She pressed the button. A breath, some road noise, a radio far away playing a song that could not quite be named. Then a single word, spoken in a voice that knew the room. Lesson. No anger. No promise. Just the shape of a path laid down where one had not been. Ruth's hand hovered and then pressed delete. The machine blinked the way a person blinks when trying not to cry, and then succeeded. The clown stood in the doorway, one shoulder against the frame, bearing no weight and all of it. She took the folded letter from her pocket and set it beside the base of the lamp. I don't know what to learn, she said, almost laughing at the smallness of it. He turned the napkin, the one with the finished curve, from her bag where she had carried it without knowing. He laid it on the table, then drew a tiny doorway in the arch of the line, a square with no handle. Ruth stared, breath hitching once, the instruction gentle and sharp at the same time. Night slipped its arm around the town. The train hummed its far, low word. Mason brushed his teeth and forgot to spit once. He laughed, surprised by the mistake. The clown stepped back onto the porch and let the door rest against the latch, not closing, not open, the old compromise. In the square, the bronze soldier had become silhouette. The broom leaned in its place, as if listening to the ground's old story. The courthouse clock considered the hour and let it be. And as the first stars found the water tower's curve, a small knocking began somewhere no one could point to, patient as tide, asking to be answered in the morning. Morning carried the soft knocking into daylight. It wasn't at the door. It lived in the house, the baseboards tick, the pipes swallow, the clock's shy insistence. Mason listened with his mouth slightly open, as if the sound might be tasted. Ruth moved slowly, as though the floor had instructions written on it she didn't want to miss. The clown stood at the hallway's end, framed by the doorway like punctuation at the end of a quiet sentence. He touched the wall once with 2 fingers, a greeting to the timber. Then he stepped onto the porch. The air was thin and clean, laid out like a tablecloth before breakfast. Maple Street eased itself awake. A screen door breathed. Someone set a trash can upright with care. A blue jay dragged its sharp voice across the morning and then grew polite. Across the way, Mrs. Connolly shook a rug and paused to look at the clown with the kind of gratitude that doesn't require a cause. Ruth carried 2 bowls to the table. Mason blew across his cereal as if cooling a lake. The red thread glowed dull in the early light. Ruth glanced at the folded letter on the lamp base and left it there, like a rock marking a trail. Today, she said, trying the word on her tongue, we do normal. The clown inclined his head. He reached into his coat and set a small object beside Mason's bowl, a brass button, old, smooth with use. The boy's eyes widened. He turned it in his fingers and held it to his ear, listening for what it remembered. From the soldier? He asked. The clown neither confirmed nor denied. He pressed his thumb to the tabletop once, sealing the gift. They walked toward the square together, not in a line this time but shoulder close, the space between them lightweight as thread. The town met them halfway. June stood in the diner door with a lemon wedge and a look that said she had already decided to extend the morning for as long as it needed. The broom leaned at the statue, dry now, a spare spine. On the courthouse steps, a custodian hosed yesterday into the drain. Water stitched silver along the curb, catching small leaves and sending them traveling. The clown watched the flow with careful attention, as if learning where the street wanted to carry a thing once it was no longer needed. School's in an hour, June said softly to Ruth. He could go for a half day. Ruth measured Mason's face, tired, bright, brave, and nodded. A half, she agreed. A car rolled past, windows up, the driver's face turned to the middle distance. It didn't slow. The shadow it left behind leaned farther than the car itself had leaned, then tucked itself away. They stood by the bulletin board. The fare poster, resecured, looked like it belonged there. A second loop of thread had been tied higher, a tiny red horizon. The clown reached up and straightened it, no more than an inch. The motion felt like sweeping a thought clear. Mason tugged Ruth's sleeve. "Can we stop by the soldier? I want to see if the button is missing." They crossed the square. The statue's bronze had taken on the day in a thin sheen. Mason lifted the button toward the soldier's chest and found the small scar where one might have been, long ago. He didn't try to fix it. He put the button back in his pocket and patted it twice, satisfied with the idea that not everything broken asks to be repaired. From the far edge of town, an engine started, coughed, caught. The sound arrived and then stood still, as if deciding whether to become part of their morning. Ruth's jaw tightened. The clown's posture grew steady like a tree, adding a ring in winter. The engine faded, uncertain. At the school gate, a cluster of children moved in the way flocks practice. Mason hesitated. His fingers found the clown's sleeve and then the coarse fabric of Ruth's coat, his hands bridging what had kept him upright. The clown crouched, touched the red thread, then tapped very lightly at the point above Mason's heart, a metronome inside the boy that no one could take away. Mason nodded, the kind that says, "I will try." He went in. The gate closed with a sound kinder than it needed to be. Ruth stood very straight, then less so, then breathed. The clown did not watch the door. He watched the space around it, the air that would have to make room for anything that meant harm. A faint shadow leaned at the corner of a distant building and peeled away, taking itself elsewhere. By noon, the square had warmed. Ruth and June sat on the diner steps, talking about nothing while meaning everything. The clown stood across from them, not guarding, simply present enough that the town remembered its better self. A wind came up and lifted the fair poster's bottom edge. It thought of tearing again and did not. When the school bell released the small flood of voices, Mason ran with the manageable speed of children who have chosen their own pace. He reached them pink-cheeked and breath-sure, a half-day earned. He pressed the brass button into Ruth's palm and kept the thread on his wrist. The clown met his gaze. Mason held it. Something passed between them, quiet, firm, like a knot pulled once and finding it was good. They began to walk home through light that had decided to stay. The train at the river lifted its long, contented word. The town loosened its shoulders by one invisible degree. The knocking faded into the ordinary noises of a place at peace with its edges. But as they turned onto Maple Street, a small square of paper lifted from the porch rail where no breeze should have been, rose to meet Ruth's hand, and settled, her own handwriting staring back at her from a page she hadn't yet written. Lesson 2, it said, without ink, the letters somehow already part of the paper. And somewhere in the calm, a new question opened its eyes and waited to be named.